What's up, sports fans? This is the Lucas Ross Sports Channel. It is time to give you my official 2025 SEC football projections for the upcoming 2025 college football season. So as you guys know, last Friday I completed all my schedule previews and give you a very early projected record for every single Power 4 team. So with those completed, I'm going to show you what the standings could look like based on the projections for 2025 for all these Power 4 teams, and especially here in this video for the SEC. I want to make this clear that this is not an official prediction. These are simply projections based off of how tough each and every team's schedule was basically in the SEC, and we just gave you that projected record based off of how good we expect each team to be. So let's now get right into it. We'll start with the SEC for today. We got the Big 10 coming up tomorrow, and then the Big 12 on Wednesday, and then we'll do the ACC to close things out on Thursday. So we'll start with the SEC here for today. We got the standings here, so we'll start from the top and work our way down to the bottom. So at the top here, I got Texas at the number 1 spot. They are projected to go 11-1 based on how tough their schedule is. I like the way the schedule sets up here for Texas in the SEC especially, but they got that non-conference game against Ohio State. That's obviously going to be the big one there for the Longhorns. For Texas, though, again, it's mostly about their SEC schedule. I mean, if they lose to Ohio State, they can probably win out for the rest of the year and go undefeated in conference play. But they also got Georgia on the road, probably the toughest game on that schedule for Texas. So if they somehow beat Georgia on the road and win out for the rest of the year, then yeah, it could turn out to be a pretty good year for Texas. But if they lose to Georgia, let's say they beat Ohio State, but they lose to Georgia, they could still make it to the SEC championship and then also still make it to the playoff. So yeah, Texas, based on their schedule, they are projected to go 11-1. They have a schedule that just sets up pretty well in the SEC, and it's not a tough schedule whatsoever here for 2025. I think Texas's worst case scenario is probably going to be 10-2, and then worst case is probably 10-2, and then best case probably 12-0 and going undefeated. So again, Texas 11-1 projection for them in 2025, and then you got 3 teams here: Georgia, Ole Miss, and Tennessee. These 3 teams are projected to go 10-2. For Georgia, I could see them definitely doing a little bit better than that. They do have a schedule in the SEC that does give them a chance to probably have a better season compared to last year. I know they went 10-2 last year, but Georgia definitely has a schedule that's going to be probably definitely favorable for them next time. They don't have a tough non-conference schedule. They got some of their big games at home in the SEC this year, including Ole Miss and Alabama, the 2 teams that they lost to last year, both on the road. So yeah, Georgia definitely has a much better chance to probably do much better than 10-2, but they can also go 11-1, and then they also could probably go 9-3, which I don't really think they're going to go 9-3 though, because I think Georgia's definitely going to be right there around 10 or 11 wins, somewhere in that particular win range. For Ole Miss, they do have a little bit of a tough schedule, but it's not quite as bad as you might think. I'm really concerned about the roster though for Ole Miss. I mean, they have a lot to replace from last year. That's the only thing I'm concerned about for Ole Miss, is definitely the roster, but they got some transfers coming in to help them out. Again, it's really about the schedule for them though that we're talking about them in this video. Their schedule does give them a chance to win 10 games again, but wouldn't be surprised if Ole Miss definitely takes a step back from where they were last year. They go 9-3, that's definitely not a disappointment, but if they go 8-4 or 7-5, that's definitely probably a disappointment there on Ole Miss fans' part. But if they go 11-1, that's definitely going to be a surprise in my opinion, even 12-0. I just don't think Ole Miss can go 12-0, but they can definitely probably go like 9-3 or 10-2 at best. So Ole Miss there sitting with a projection of 10-2. Tennessee also projected to go 10-2. Their schedule does, set up pretty well for them in order to have a chance to make it back to a playoff and everything, but there's been a lot of rumors out there. Nico Amaliava is now going to be probably gone for Tennessee because of NIL situation. I really don't know how to respond to that and everything, but it is just big news for Tennessee because Nico Amaliava is probably the best quarterback on that team. But, they got some depth at the quarterback position. We'll see how that plays out for them. Again, that's now a concern there if you're Tennessee in that, this season for 2025. But, yeah, Tennessee projected to go 10-2 based on their schedule. They got to play Florida and Alabama both on the road, but if they win at least one of those 2 games, and they could probably, at least finish 10-2 still. They got to play Georgia at home, which does give them a pretty good opportunity to pull off an upset there. And they also got Syracuse in the non-conference. So if they split those games, they probably win, probably 2 out of the 4, those games there, and then they probably lose 2 of them. That's still going to give them a projection of 10-2. So yeah, Tennessee, they are projected to go 10-2. Their worst case scenario probably 9-3, and then best case probably 11-1. But yeah, Georgia, Ole Miss, and Tennessee, these are all teams projected to go 10-2. And then you got Alabama here at 9-3. Alabama has a pretty tough non-conference schedule. They got to play Florida State and Wisconsin both in the non-conference. They play Florida State on the road, but they do have, Wisconsin at home. I think they'll be favored in both of those games, but, the Florida State game definitely not by much. The Wisconsin game, they can probably be favored by double digits, but yeah, those will not be easy games there for Alabama. They also kind of have a tough SEC schedule. They do got to play Tennessee on that schedule. They also got to play Georgia on the road. So yeah, that's going to be pretty tough there for Alabama, but it does give them a projection of 9-3 based on how tough their schedule is. Their best case scenario probably 10-2, and their worst case probably going to be like 8-4. But if Alabama goes 8-4, that's definitely going to be a disappointment in my opinion for the Crimson Tide. So that is the first set of 5 teams. Let's now go on to the next tier of teams. We got 4 teams, all with 8-4 projections for 2025. You got LSU, Missouri, South Carolina, and Texas A&M. So with these projections, I feel like these teams are going to be pretty decent teams, and they could be like dark horse teams in the SEC perhaps, but you look at LSU, they obviously got to play Clemson in the non-conference, so one of their losses could be coming, probably to Clemson, and then those 3 more losses could probably come in the SEC, but LSU, I kind of expect them to do better than that. This is an LSU team that's been recruiting pretty well in the transfer portal, and they're sitting there with a projection of 8-4, though, based on their schedule, and based off of what they did last year. You look at Missouri, they may not be as good as they were from last year. Missouri definitely going to be probably taking a step back from where they've been in the last couple years. They've had some really good seasons under, their head coach and everything, and Eli Drinkwitz, but Missouri definitely lost a lot of talent from last year, and the schedule, it's not tough for them, but they do got a non-conference game against Kansas, so they'll be favored probably in that game, but the SEC schedule, it could be a lot worse for them as well. They got to play Texas A&M and Alabama both on the schedule, but they get those 2 games at home, so that does give Missouri a chance to probably have a pretty decent season, but I just feel like it's going to be a pretty big step back here for the Tigers of Missouri after what they did in the last couple years. South Carolina, 8-4 projection for them. They have a pretty tough schedule once again. They got to play a couple of teams in the non-conference out of the ACC. You got Virginia Tech, and then also you got Clemson at the end of the year. So yeah, they play Virginia Tech at the beginning of the season, and then at the end of the year they play Clemson. So that's interesting there for South Carolina. They have a very tough schedule in the SEC as well, but based off of what they did last year, they are projected to go 8-4 because they will be favored in some of their SEC games on that schedule. Most of their games that they have a chance to win them, they definitely get them at home this year, and then some of their tougher games are probably on the road. So yeah, South Carolina, their projection to go 8-4, and then you got Texas A&M here projected also to go 8-4. The Aggies have a non-conference game against Notre Dame on the road in week 3, but the rest of the schedule kind of does give them a chance to be a decent team this year in 2025. So yeah, I kind of expect Texas A&M to be right there around 6, 7, 8 wins, or maybe 9 wins at best. And I think that's probably the best case scenario. The best case scenario for all 4 of these teams projected to go 8-4. The best case is probably 9-3, and then worst case probably 7-5 for them. I wouldn't be shocked if Missouri and South Carolina probably went 7-5. I would definitely be shocked though if LSU and Texas A&M drop off from where they were from last year. But yeah, Texas A&M and LSU, that's probably their best, worst case scenarios is 7-5. But if Missouri and South Carolina probably drop off from where they were from last year, it probably wouldn't surprise me because of how tough their schedules are. Missouri definitely has an easier schedule than South Carolina does, but for South Carolina, I wouldn't be surprised if they drop off a little bit from last year. But yeah, these teams are all projected to go 8-4. And then at the bottom here, you got Florida projected to go 7-5. Again, Florida's got a very tough schedule this year in 2025, but they got to play Miami and also Florida State in the non-conference. They play Miami on the road, but they play Florida State at home, and I think they might be favored against Florida State by less than a touchdown perhaps because of how Florida State performed from last year. But yeah, 7-5 is their projection for Florida. I mean, they'd have a tough conference schedule this year, but either way, they are projected to go 7-5. I think 8-4 probably their best case scenario. Then worst case probably going to be 6-6. But if they go 6-6, that definitely would not shock me because of how tough the schedule is, especially in the non-conference and definitely in the SEC. But they are projected to go 7-5 based on their schedule. All right, the next set of teams, we got Arkansas. They are projected to go 6-6, and then same thing with Auburn. These two teams are projected to go 6-6 and make it to a bowl game just barely. You look at Arkansas, they have a very tough schedule in the SEC. They also got a non-conference game against also Notre Dame, and they get that one at home, but that's going to be a tough game there for Arkansas to win, and if they win that game, they probably go on to have a 7-5 type year, but if they lose that game, they probably still can make it to a bowl game at 6-6 and finish at 500, to be honest. But yeah, Arkansas has another tough schedule in 2025, and it's kind of hard to tell how good Arkansas is going to be each and every single year from now on. And then you look at Auburn. I kind of expect Auburn to turn things around this year. I mean, I'm not really that high on them, like very high to be like a SEC contender or anything like that, but I think they can definitely win more games than last year because they went 5-7. They had a disappointing year, and that's probably the worst case scenario here for both Arkansas and Auburn. Their worst case scenario is probably like 5-7 and not making it to a bowl game. Their best case scenarios would definitely have to be 7-5. I mean, Auburn's got a tough non-conference game against Baylor on the road on that Week 1 Friday night game, so that's probably going to be the game that sets the tone here for the rest of the season for Auburn. If they lose to Baylor, that's probably going to be a disappointing year for Auburn, but if they win it, they could probably make it to a bowl game. But they got to play Georgia and Alabama both on the schedule, but the good news is they get both of those games at home, so if they win one of those two games, they can probably go on to have a 7-5 year as well, but they can also finish at 6-6. But as of right now, based on their schedule, they are projected to go 6-6, and they're definitely making it to a bowl game in my opinion. So yeah, both of these teams are projected to go 6-6. And then you got Oklahoma and Vanderbilt. These two teams projected to go 5-7. You look at Oklahoma, they have a very tough schedule this year, especially in the non-conference. They got to play Michigan, of course. They get that game at home, though. And I think that's going to be the game that sets the tone as the season goes on for Oklahoma as well. If they beat Michigan, I think they make it to a bowl game. But if they don't beat them, then they probably don't make it to a bowl game, and they go 5-7 because they have a tough schedule in the SEC. They really got to play some of the top teams in the SEC from last year. So yeah, Oklahoma, they are projected to go 5-7 based on this schedule. And then same thing for Vanderbilt. They also have a pretty tough schedule this year, especially in the SEC. But they do got a non-conference game against Virginia Tech. They will play that one on the road. That game is going to be really kind of setting the tone here for the rest of the season for the Condors as well. But yeah, they win that game. I think Vanderbilt also makes it to a bowl game. But if they don't, I think Vanderbilt comes up just short of making it to a bowl game, and they go 5-7. But yeah, Vanderbilt, they had a pretty good year last year. We'll see if they can probably turn things, into another good season for them in 2025. But yeah, both of these teams are projected to miss out on a bowl game by one game. They are both projected to go 5-7. But their best case scenario is definitely making it to a bowl game at 6-6, and their worst case is probably like 4-8. And then you got Kentucky that is projected to go 4-8 right here at the bottom. Kentucky, don't know how good this team is going to be. I know they brought in a lot of transfers to help them out, but they do have a tough schedule, especially in the SEC. And they also got that non-conference game against Louisville, so maybe one of their 8 losses could probably come against, the Cardinals, and maybe they can go winless in the SEC, but at best, I think they can win a couple of games in the SEC. If they win a couple of games, then they can probably make it to 6-6 and get back to a bowl game. That's what Kentucky needs to do this year. If they don't make it to a bowl game, that might be the end of the Mark Stoops era right there. But I think their best case scenario is probably like 5-7, and then worst case like 3-9. So that is probably the worst and best case scenarios there for Kentucky. Again, they have a very tough schedule in the SEC for 2025. And then at the way bottom here, we got Mississippi State, the last team here projected to go 3-9. I think Mississippi State has one of the toughest schedules almost in the country. They also have one of the toughest schedules in the SEC conference, in conference play at best. I mean, they got a tough SEC schedule. They got to play some of the top teams in the SEC. I think they got Tennessee on that schedule. They got to play Georgia. They also got to play Texas. I mean, they get those games at home. They also play Ole Miss in the Egg Bowl, which I think they might have a chance to beat them this year because of all the losses that, Ole Miss has from last year's team. But yeah, Mississippi State, they are projected to go 3-9. They also have that non-conference game against Arizona State, and I think that's going to be probably setting the tone here for the season for Mississippi State. If they somehow pull off an upset against Arizona State, then it probably could be like a 4-8 or 5-7 type year for Mississippi State. But if they lose that game, it's probably going to be a really bad season for Mississippi State once again, which I wouldn't be shocked if they probably go 2-10 or 3-9, or if they go 4-8 or 5-7. That definitely will surprise me a lot here for the Bulldogs. But yeah, as of right now, best case scenario for them is 4-8, worst case 2-10. But as of right now, their projection is 3-9 based on how tough their schedule is. So those are my official SEC football projections for 2025. Do you guys agree or disagree? Let me know your thoughts about my SEC football projections, and give me your projections for the SEC down in the comments below. Thanks for watching this video, and stay tuned for more sports content videos on my Lucas Ross Sports YouTube channel.